that force in the dark, and they're able to have their manifestations.
So they clothe themselves often in ectoplasm, which is produced, I think, by the pancreas or spleen or something of the medium. And then explain, if you can, what is ectoplasm?
In my fourth book, which we're going to discuss today, Spectral Evidence, Volume 1, which is a compilation of all different
mediums. Yeah, it's great. I have to say, it's really enjoyable.
Mind-boggling phenomena.
Yes.
There is a chapter on ectoplasm, and I'll read the first little segment of the chapter. It says, one of the greatest marvels within the world of historic spiritualism and mediumship is a substance which seems to underlie all physical manifestations of mediumship, ectoplasm. From the Greek, ektos and plasma, exteriorized substance, protoplasmic substance streaming out of the body of the mediums, by the manipulation of which, either by the subconscious self or by discarnate intelligences, phenomena of a super physical order, including partial and complete materializations, are produced. The word ectoplasm was originated by Professor Charles Bichet of Paris. And I go on to say that my wife and I have closely seen and observed ectoplasm. We had a physical medium staying at our house in 2008. He was there for 3 months.
Wow, good.
A very powerful physical medium. And we saw with our own eyes. We were called to the curtained-off cabinet. The medium was cable tied to his chair. There's no way on earth, under my own conditions, there's no way on earth that the medium could have got out of that chair. He was 2 feet from me. The spirit who was standing behind him said, you can open up the curtains, and I want you to look and see. Turn the red light on. We did. There's the medium, unconscious in his chair, and there was this, I can't even describe, whiter than white, the whitest snow you've ever seen, brilliant white, streaming from his mouth, and near his solar plexus, this cloud of white, pulsating energy, in the middle of which a hand started to form.
Wow!
Right
Wow! You saw this in your own home.
I mean, 1 foot from our face. There's no doubt, no question about any of it. What was going on?
Yeah.
It streamed from his nose and his mouth, and partially from his ears, and just cascaded down his chest. And there in front of us, it pulsated, and the hand formed. And then the spirit again said, that's as far as we can go, as far as you're seeing it right now. So we had to go back to our seats and close the curtain.
Oh, my goodness.
The next day, we were sitting, the medium, my wife and I were sitting at a round table, wooden table, with the red light on. The medium was conscious and sitting right there with us. We all looked over, and no question whatsoever, a white cloud, a vaporous cloud, issued from the cabinet and made its way over towards our table. Then it came over. The temperature of the room went down about 15 degrees. You could almost see your breath.
Wow.
And the ectoplasm slowly disappeared. We were all, of course, breathless, including the medium. The table then, with no one touching it, rose from the floor about 2 feet, right in front of us, right up in the air.
Wow.
We all pushed our chairs back, and there was the table levitating in space, in thin air.
Yeah.
And then the spirit control later said that we were manipulating the table with ectoplasmic rods.
Yes.
Which went from the medium to the cabinet and over to the table.
That is amazing. This is something I copied from that chapter. Ectoplasm is matter, intangible and invisible, which can, through the assistance of the spirit operators, become tangible and visible. So basically those rods were, I guess, not visible. It's seen in many states and forms and in many colors and degrees of density. It appears in liquid, vaporous, and solid states as a thin ethereal gauze-like substance, or solid to the extent it's tangible and becomes a human body. Even in its most tangible form, it can disappear from our sight instantaneously. The simple explanation of this is that the vibration of the ectoplasm is changed to one that does not register upon the physical vision. Actually, that chapter is worth the price of the book, because you talk, I think, more effectively about ectoplasm there than I have ever seen anybody talk about it. I mean, I've been curious about it, and it's fun to think you had it in your own house.
Oh, certainly under our own conditions. That was the main thing. Is that
you could control it. There was no gimmick possible because it was your house and you were
right. No critic, debunker, scientist. I don't care what they say. I don't care what any scientist says. You're not going to talk me out of what I saw. That's all there is to it. I am tired of the scientists who think they have the last word. They have no word. That's what my opinion is. If you haven't seen it under your own conditions, you cannot talk about it.
It's a whole area of reality they will not look at. Exactly. And just so everybody can kind of start being excited about this with us, for the past decade, our wonderful friend Craig Hogan has been working with his own circle, and he is developing a physical medium today, and a very promising physical medium. So we're hopefully going to be able to have people experience this. There are other physical mediums in the world now, but he's watching this happen in front of himself every week in his own house. Again, seeing is believing. I want to actually read a quote from the book. Someone called Reverend Dr. Robert Moore was the medium, and it was an excellent example of what happens if you go to a seance and the medium is very good. It's people who are spirit can clothe themselves in ectoplasm, can use that ectoplasm to create a voice box and adapt that voice box to speak in the voice they had when they were alive. I mean, amazing things can be done with this ectoplasm stuff, but it does react badly to light. In fact, there was one medium whose name escapes me who was killed because they're very careful to keep all the doors closed, all the windows closed, everything, so that when a medium is in deep trance, it's not possible for light to get in, because if it hits the ectoplasm will all snap back into the body of the medium. It stays connected with the body. Well, this was one case in the 50s where the police decided to do a raid at the wrong time. The medium was hospitalized, but then died from the fact that all that ectoplasm snapped back into her body.
One of the last seances of Helen Duncan, the Scottish.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, this is the kind of thing which science will do. I mean, scientists will do everything they can to protect the illusion that matter is real. And they're doing that still, but it won't be much longer. And I just want to read this. Someone who was sitting in 1936 with a medium called Dr. Robert Moore explained why this was so compelling. He said, "To my mind, the exact duplication of the body, the features, the speech, the photographic memory, and the identical personality of a man or woman whose physical body has long since been laid in the grave or incinerated into a few handfuls of ashes is the most astonishing of all miracles of psychic phenomena. To see a man in fair ruby light step from a cabinet, walk over to you, even though you may be a dozen feet from the cabinet, and give you a good strong hug or a hearty handshake, talk with you in a natural, resonant tone of voice about events that prove him to have retained a perfect memory for details." This is someone who apparently is already dead. "And after a few minutes, bid you a cheerful goodbye and dissolve into the fog of dematerialization before your eyes and sink through the floor is an absolutely unforgettable experience." And as you point out, Riley, when it happens, nobody can ever tell you again it didn't happen. You can't. That's a genie. You'll never get back into the bottle. So if we have enough physical mediums and open-minded people who can come and sit with them, we're going to spread the word of the truth so quickly. There are, especially in the UK, there are some very good physical mediums now sitting. But we're trying to put the phenomenon in the US because there are so many more people here. And frankly, I think that that's going to make all the difference. But let's talk about some of the interesting things. I just have to say, and his name is N. Riley, Riley, Heagerty. Everything he writes so far that I've ever read is fascinating and easy to read. It's all very, very accessible. And that's part of what I love about his books. They're not too long, and they make all of this easy to understand. And they also have, you do something magical. You have footnotes. I mean, I never do footnotes. I mean, to me, it's just I'm writing, and, you can follow along if you can. But you do footnotes. Bless you. I mean, it's scholarly but very accessible. Please talk a little bit about Silver Bell. I found that whole section entrancing. She's a little Indian girl, Control. And tell us about her a little bit.
Ethel Post Parrish was the founder and president of the famous Camp Silver Bell in Ephrata, Pennsylvania. Her little guide was Silver Bell, and she was the cabinet tender. She was a little Indian girl, and Ethel was one of the most powerful materialization mediums. She would have 2 or 3 spirits out on the floor at once, but in many situations of materialization or seances, especially ones where there's materialized spirits, which is just about the wonder of wonders.
Yes.
A spirit guide comes out to ease the tension, first of all. It's usually a child, but they take on the guise of a child, even though they're probably very advanced spirits, because the child, especially an Indian, would calm the audience down and say some funny things, get people laughing because they're probably just stunned with excitement and fear and who knows what.
Yes.
But in Ethel Post Parrish's case, she would have, in many instances, it's in my book too, of eyewitness accounts of things that are almost too incredible to possibly imagine by your average person. She would be led right out of the cabinet herself in trance, and each of her arms held by a materialized spirit. They would put the red light up. The whole audience would be watching as 2 spirits would lead her out from the cabinet, and then another would be talking from the cabinet. This is in front of the eyewitnesses. It cannot be denied by
that is
many people.
Amazing. Wow, that's amazing. And
Camp Silver Bell in Ephrata, Pennsylvania was named after the spirit.
Yes.
Silver Bell.
And you also talk about that it's been raised now, but was it you who
said
that
I
you
saw
got
it before
to
it was
see
taken
it? Yes.
down.
Yeah. It's too bad, but if this were a slightly more enlightened world, places like that would be preserved. But they eventually all of this will come to everyone's awareness. Talk about Elizabeth Compton, who died. I had to read that section twice. She dematerialized and then rematerialized.
Well, let me move backward a little bit. In the book I have right in my hand right now, it's my fourth book, Spectral Evidence, Volume 1.
Right, which we're talking about.
There's 14 chapters with some of the most mind-boggling mediumistic events that have ever been recorded. And then the final 15 chapters, in conclusion, my thoughts and remarks on the great mediums. But Chapter 8, which is about Elizabeth Compton, this sweet, very illiterate, hard-working washerwoman who lived in Savannah, New York, which is now Watkins Glen. She was investigated by a Colonel Henry Steele Olcott. In her case, I'll try to tell you this in edited form. Elizabeth Compton would go into the cabinet, and in the case in my book here, it's an instance of mediumship. It is so astonishing. I've only heard of it one more time, where the medium completely dematerializes inside the cabinet. In other words, spirits are out on the floor. The investigator, Colonel Olcott, would go into the cabinet, and there's no medium there in the chair.
Oh.
Whereas before the seance, they took sewing thread and threaded through her pierced ears down to the floor and stamped the ends of the thread with sealing wax.
Oh, gee.
The medium didn't mind at all. So they had a very flimsy thread down to the floor. In other words, there is nothing that she could do to escape from that situation where it was right through her pierced ears. So while the spirits were out on the floor, Colonel Olcott went in, and Mrs. Compton was gone completely.
What happened to the